When I was younger, I had always loved camping, but this time was different. It was my first time camping with my children, Jack and Emma. Since it was their first time spending the night in the woods, they were anxious. In a tiny clearing encircled by towering, thick trees, we had pitched our tent. The scent of pine needles permeated the air, which was clean. Everything was bathed in a warm, orange glow as the sun descended. We told stories and roasted marshmallows over the campfire in the evening. Despite their laughter and apparent relaxation, I could still see the children's nervousness in their eyes. Except for the distant call of an owl and the sporadic rustle of leaves, the forest was silent. The forest seemed more enigmatic, and the darkness surrounding us seemed to deepen as night fell. We settled into our sleeping bags after climbing into our tent. Jack and Emma cuddled up to me, looking for solace in the strange environment. Their eyes soon became heavy after I read them a story to help them relax. They were about to fall asleep when an odd sound reverberated through the trees. The sound was faint, like the rustle of leaves, almost like a whisper. Emma woke up and gave me a wide-eyed stare. I tried to sound calm as I whispered, "Don't worry. It's only the wind." Although she nodded, it was clear that she wasn't persuaded. I paid close attention, trying to hear if the sound would reappear. There was only the soft sound of the breeze for a few seconds. Then, as I was beginning to unwind, I heard it once more. It was closer this time. It sounded as though something was slowly making its way through the brush. My heart started beating faster. I inhaled deeply and made an effort to remain composed so as not to frighten the children. I grabbed the flashlight and turned it on, illuminating the interior of the tent with a beam of light. The children huddled closer, their terrified eyes wide. "It's all right," I said quietly. "Let's see what it is." Using my flashlight, I slowly unzipped the tent flap and looked outside. The trees and bushes surrounding our campsite became visible as the light beam pierced the night. Everything appeared to be motionless. I listened once more, but all I could hear was my own heart beating. The tent trembled a little as there was a sudden, gentle thud. The fabric felt as though something had pressed against it from the outside. Jack took a firm hold of my arm as Emma gasped. In a desperate attempt to identify what it was, I frantically shone the flashlight around. I heard a low growling sound as the tent shook once more violently this time. I was terrified. The children were scared, and I had no idea what was out there. I felt powerless, but I had to keep them safe. The tent shook violently as the growling intensified. Jack buried his face in my side as Emma began to cry. "Stay close," I said in a tremulous voice. The shaking then stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The forest became quiet again as the growling stopped. I listened for any movement while holding my breath. I heard a soft, familiar sound after what seemed like an eternity. A meow. I felt a wave of relief upon realizing what had transpired. Whiskers, our cat, had trailed us into the forest. She must have become disoriented and wandered to our tent in search of safety. It was unbelievable to me. Our pet had kept us completely terrified the entire time. Whispering for Whiskers, I unzipped the tent flap and went outside. Her eyes glowed in the flashlight beam as she emerged from the shadows. I felt her purr against my chest as I picked her up and held her close. Emma and Jack's fear gave way to surprise as they peered out of the tent. I smiled and said, "It's just Whiskers." The children, relieved and delighted to see the cat, came out and gave her a hug. After bringing Whiskers inside the tent, we took our seats again. The children embraced me once more. However, they were grinning this time. I couldn't help but chuckle at the circumstances as we lay there. We were terrified because we thought there was something dangerous outside, but it turned out to be our cunning cat. It served as a reminder that things aren't always as they seem, and that our fears can occasionally overcome us. The remainder of the night was quiet. The children quickly fell asleep, forgetting their earlier fear as Whiskers curled up at our feet. I listened to the forest sounds for a little while longer, and appreciated our furry friend's unexpected comfort. When the sun rose in the morning, the campsite was bathed in a golden glow. After appearing so ominous in the dark, the forest now appeared lovely and welcoming. The children, no longer terrified of the woods, chattered excitedly about their adventure as we packed up our belongings. I came to the realization that this camping trip had actually been a success as we made our way home. We had confronted our anxieties, found solace in one another, and learned that there might be a light waiting to lead us even in the most dire circumstances. I made the decision to camp by myself in the middle of the forest. Away from the hustle and bustle of the city, I needed some tranquility. I wanted to find some alone time and experience the peace of nature. I drove until I found the ideal location after packing my backpack with everything I would need. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds, and the trees were dense and tall. It was just what I was searching for. I pitched my tent in a little tree-lined clearing. The air smelled clean and fresh, and the ground was soft and covered in fallen leaves. As I set up my campsite, I experienced a wave of calm. I prepared some dinner, built a small fire, and then settled in to take in the peaceful evening. The sky became a stunning shade of pink and orange as the sun started to set. I felt totally relaxed as the forest appeared to glow in the gentle light. As night fell, I made myself comfortable in my tent. I was hoping for a restful night's sleep in the peaceful forest. I began to hear a faint whistling sound as I lay there. I initially assumed it was simply the wind rustling the trees. I didn't give it much thought, but it was a soft, almost melodic sound. I tried to fall asleep by closing my eyes. However, the whistling became more intense. The sound was no longer distant and gentle. With every hour that went by, it seemed to get stronger and closer. My heart was racing as I sat up in my tent. I listened intently, attempting to locate the source of the sound. It appeared to be moving around, occasionally getting closer and sometimes getting farther away. I kept telling myself it was the wind, but I couldn't get rid of the uneasiness that was building inside of me. I made the decision to leave my tent and explore. Only the moon's light was visible through the trees in the pitch-black forest. I took out my flashlight and scanned the campsite with it. There was a pause in the whistling, and I wondered if I was dreaming. Then it began anew, closer and louder than before. I circled the clearing in an attempt to locate the sound's origin. Only the trees and the shadows they created caught my attention. I was about to return to my tent when I noticed something odd in the beam of my flashlight. I had not previously noticed the strange marks and eerie symbols that were carved on the trees surrounding my campsite. A shiver went down my spine as they appeared to glow dimly in the moonlight. The whistling increased in volume until it was nearly intolerable. A surge of terror swept through me. There was a problem. I had to go. With trembling hands, I hastily packed up my belongings. I thought the whistling was inside my head because it was so loud. I saw them as I began to return the way I had come. My path was blocked by strange, shadowy figures standing between the trees. They remained motionless and observed me. I had a panic attack, and my heart was pounding. I swung around and ran the other way, wishing to escape in some other way. The figures were always just out of my line of sight, as if they were following me. They were there, preventing me from getting away no matter which way I turned. Now, the high-pitched whistling was so loud that it was giving me a headache. Trying to find my way out of the dark forest, I staggered. My flashlight died after flickering, leaving me in the dark. I recalled the trail I'd entered in a last-ditch effort to get away. I turned and sprinted in its direction in the hopes that it would return me to safety. Now the figures were nearer, practically within grasp. I sensed their icy, threatening presence closing in on me. I exerted more effort, breathing in ragged gasps. I finally caught a glimpse of the forest's edge. The whistling abruptly stopped as I rushed out into the open. The sound had been terrifying, but the silence was nearly as much. I kept running until I got to my car. I hopped in, turned on the ignition, and fled as quickly as I could. My hands were shaking as I held onto the steering wheel, and my heart was still racing. Even though I made it to safety, I knew what had transpired in those woods would always be in my memory. My dreams would always be plagued by the eerie whistling, the odd carvings, and the shadowy figures. If this is your first visit, Please make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon for upcoming scary stories before we move on to the next story. We are in need of your help. Kindly tell your loved ones and friends about these tales. Regards. I adore going camping. I always feel alive and free when I'm in nature. I made the decision to camp this summer near the lake where my family and I used to go when I was a child. The lake, which was full of clear water and encircled by towering trees, was lovely. Good memories were always evoked by the sound of birds and the scent of pine. I used to go here with my father. He cherished this location. By the campfire, we would swim, fish, and share stories. However, my dad died 5 years ago. I found it difficult to return here without him. I really missed him. It was in the afternoon when I reached the lake. The sky was clear, and the sun shone. I gathered some wood for a fire later and pitched my tent close to the water. I wanted to take advantage of the quiet evening by preparing dinner. I cooked some fish I had caught earlier and lit the fire as the sun began to set. I was reminded of the times I spent cooking with my father by the aroma of the fish that was cooking. I sat by the fire and gazed at the stars after supper. The lake was still, and the night was quiet. The sound of the water gently crashing against the beach was audible to me. Even though the night was perfect, I felt a weird coldness as I looked into the fire. I shivered because of the sudden coldness. There was nothing out of the ordinary when I looked around. To decompress, I made the decision to go for a stroll by the lake. The water was bathed in silvery light from the bright moon. Long shadows were cast by the trees, and I could see where I was going because the path had just enough lighting. I could hear footsteps behind me as I was moving. I whirled around, but there was nobody there. My heart began to beat more rapidly. I arrived at the location where I used to fish with my father. As I stood there gazing at the water, I reflected on our enjoyable times together. All of a sudden, I noticed something floating in the water. It had the appearance of an ancient wooden box. My father was gone when I turned to face him. He disappeared without a trace. I nearly fell because my legs felt weak. I knew I had to get that box even though I had no idea what was going on. The coldness of the water bit my skin as I waded into it. I dragged the box to the shore, though it was heavier than I had anticipated. Soaked and shivering, I sat down and opened the box. I discovered letters, old pictures, and a fishing lure that belonged to my father inside. I was crying as I went through the things. I believed that these memories and fragments of my past were forever gone. I discovered a letter addressed to me among the others. My father's handwriting was on it. "You have found the box, my dear son. If you are reading this, I wanted you to have these memories, so I hid it here. They are a part of our time together and of who we are. Despite the fact that you cannot see me, I am always with you because I love you. Remember the fun times we shared, and look after yourself. For us, the lake will always hold a special place. Dad, love." Tears were streaming down my face as I sat there, holding the letter. This was a gift from my father, who had reached out to me from beyond the grave. Knowing that he was keeping an eye on me gave me a sense of calm. A cozy sense of love and connection took the place of the fear and confusion. I looked through the letters and pictures by the fire for the remainder of the night, thinking back on my father and our shared memories. The stars were twinkling above the still, silent lake. I was aware that my father would always be a part of my life and that he was still with me in spirit form. As the sun rose over the lake the following morning, I gathered my belongings and got ready to depart. I was thankful for the experience and gave the water one last glance. A light wind blew past me as I left, as though my father were bidding me farewell. I had no doubt that I would return here. In addition to our memories, the lake now contained a portion of my father's soul,